High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Don Mattingly. Tucker waits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Table Setters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined with my tag partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up? WBC over. We're finishing up spring training now. Steve and I are kind of on our home field today, recording the East Division previews tonight. Two separate episodes starting here with the National League East. And listen, Steve and I are super passionate about all of baseball, but like I said, this feels kind of like our home field. So we're going to dive in here, try to take our bias out of it. Obviously, I'm the Mets fan. Steve is the Yankees fan, and try to take apart each one of these teams.
Yeah, for much of the better part of the last couple of seasons, the National League East has existed in this constant state of pressure, trying to gain who's going to be the top of the division. And every one of these teams, when you get into the year, a lot of the top teams, the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves, they come in with these high expectations. You got star power everywhere. And what we've seen the last couple of years, too, with these top contenders is the separation's rarely comfortable during the year. And I think even at its peak, this has been a division that allows teams to really challenge each other and their battle tests by the time they get to the playoffs. So I'm really curious about getting into this National League East preview with you.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you think about Mets, Phillies, Braves for the last several years. But if you look at last year's standings, the Mets were like barely better than the Marlins when it was all said and done. With that being said, there was a long part of the season it felt like the Mets and Phillies just kept on flip-flopping first and second. Mets obviously started the season so well for the first couple months. And then they'd hit like a little slide and then get it back together. Phillies would go ahead of them. Mets would catch back up. And then eventually the Mets just cratered, as we know. And the Phillies took off and never looked back there. But a lot of changes in the division, definitely for the Mets. The Phillies, interesting that I think more of the band is back together than we thought would be. And the Marlins, like, listen, we know they're going to have pitching for days. We know they're going to have some gritty players. They're building this team the way they want it. Peter Bendix has an image in his head, and he's little by little creating what he is looking for. So it's a beast, National League beast. And when we get to the AL, same thing, probably even crazier. But yeah, we'll get into it here, and I'm curious what both of our standings look like at the end of the episode.
For sure. And you guys can go back in the archives and check out our other division previews. We start with the Central with the NL and the AL. And then, of course, we did the West as well. Actually, reverse those in order. But we have the other four divisions ready to go. So if you're looking for another division, go back and check it out. And in the coming days, we'll be previewing the awards and giving you guys our bracket predictions. So we're all getting ready for what's going to be happening in just about a week from now on Netflix behind a paywall, the big red and black letters, Yankees, Giants. But baseball is here. Like you said, WBC is closed. We're closing the book on that. Now we're looking forward to Major League Baseball, and it's going to take hold for this marathon. So I'm really, really stoked about it.
Yeah, and we're going to blink our eyes, and it's going to be here. And I said to Steve, and I know Steve repeated it and read it on the episode last night when he kind of reacted to Venezuela taking WBC. But I had this strange feeling when the WBC ended, obviously rooting for the USA. There was no anger, like not an ounce of anger in me, frustration, stress. Like, I enjoyed it. Yes, I was cheering on the USA, but when it was all said and done, I was like, oh, good for them. US, tough one. That kind of sucked. But like I said to Steve, I'd be more angry and frustrated by like a random Tuesday night Mets loss in May than I was last night. And I don't know what that says about me as a baseball fan or what it says about the WBC. But that was honestly my feeling. And so we're only a few weeks away here from me maybe getting on here 2 weeks into the season, ranting and raving about something the Mets did. I'm sure that's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of conversation about the WBC and what it means for the future. And we're talking about high leverage situations. That's been the talk around all of baseball today about these star players that came up short. But we're here to talk National League East. We can go in those conversations. So we want to start with your fandom. You talked about this being home field advantage. Let's go to Citi Field, Flushing, Queens. Let's talk about the New York Mets.
Yeah. All right. So we'll start with my guys here in orange and blue. Listen, when last season ended and the offseason started, I was pretty loud about being really upset with what the Mets were doing. I was all over David Stearns, but I did leave the ending open as far as all right, like let's see what he does now. As far as how he replaces some of these guys and how he builds the team. And I would say right now, maybe it's just the whole hope springs eternal, and you can convince yourself of this every year. But I feel pretty optimistic. I really, really love the potential of the lineup that you take a look at. A mix of power, patience. You get Juan Soto right there that knows the strike zone better than anybody. Speed, youth, veteran leadership. I like how they have created this team. I mean, it's not without its, ifs, right? We talk about ifs all the time in these division previews. Sure, it definitely has some. But I think their ceiling is very, very high. I really do. Juan Soto in his second year, I think will be way more comfortable than he was coming in. A lot of controversy leaving the Yankees. Although there was just a lot of drama, I think, the entire year. Will he and Lindor get along? How do people rally around him? Oh, he's not celebrating with his teammates after they hit a home run. Hopefully all that stuff is in the rear view mirror and he has some fun. I mean, you watched him playing with the DR and clearly you saw Juan Soto as having some fun. People kind of call him business-like, but he's capable of having fun too. So I'm excited to watch him in his second year, hopefully more comfortable in orange and blue. But you look at that lineup, one thing that jumps out, we know the Francisco Lindors, the Juan Sotos, right? The Bo Bichettes, but their 7 to 9 hitters, in my mind, could end up being one of the best in the league in that spot in the lineup. If you look at roster resource, and who knows how Carlos Mendoza ends up penciling this in, but as of now, they have Francisco Alvarez in the 7th spot, Luis Robert Jr., and Carson Bench. And I mean, Francisco Alvarez, we've been waiting to see the whole picture. He has flashed several times. He's also been in and out of the lineup with kind of nagging injuries that are not really like his fault. They're like catcher injuries, right? Like getting hit in bad spots, things like that. But he's got light tower power. People seem to really, really enjoy playing with him. He's pretty close with Soto as well. So he's been looking really, really good in spring. You're just hoping this is the breakout year. And Mets fans, I think we've said that before, but he's still super, super young. So I think we're still holding out hope. I think at worst, he's an average catcher, offensively, defensively. But I think at best, he can be way better than that. Luis Robert Jr., listen, we all know the story. Can he stay on the field? What will he look like in a city like New York that is supposed to be a contender? Again, super high ceiling. We've seen it the year where he almost hit 40 home runs. We know he has it. Does this get the best out of him being around guys like Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, things like that? Carson Bench, big story here. I mean, he has kind of flown through the ranks in the minors and he has hit every spot he has been in. In a way, he's kind of replacing Brandon Nimmo, even though Benj will now play right. Soto will move to left. Nimmo was more of a left fielder. Benj, I think, is a David Stearns guy, one of David Stearns' first high picks that he is pushing to the majors. So it's a big deal with his success because I think it's one kind of notch in David Stearns' belt if Benj can actually perform and perform well. And so far in spring training, he is hitting the mark. He's hitting 406 in spring, 972 OPS. Struck out just 13.9% of the time, so he's going to put the ball in play. Rocket arm in right field. Part of the reason they asked Soto to move, and I'm glad Soto said, sure. I think Soto has a chance of being better out there defensively, to be honest, and left. Benj is exciting. If he struggles, I do like what they did as backup plans. They went out and signed a guy like Mike Tauchman, MJ Melendez, who was part of the WBC, didn't play much. They're going to start him in AAA. Tauchman's looked really, really good. If Benj was not performing so well, I think they'd be thinking about letting Benj play a little AAA and Tauchman could start out in right field for the first part of the season. I really like Mike Tauchman, especially as kind of a role player, a professional ball player. Everywhere he's gone, he seems to contribute in some way, can do a little bit of everything. Not a star, obviously. That's why he kind of bounces around. But I was a big fan of that signing, and he's looked very good in spring. So they have something to fall back on, or a couple different things they could fall back on if Benj does start with the team and just really struggles mightily, for the first few weeks. When you go to the pitching side, last year, obviously, pitching a huge story. Guys couldn't go deep, right? And then the bullpen gets overused. A ton of bullpen guys get hurt. The rotation this year feels long. Okay, you add Freddie Peralta to the mix, and that was one of the things I tweeted out as soon as the Mets season ended. I said, obviously, the pitching needs to be addressed. I was saying I think they should kick the tires on Ranger Suarez and Framber Valdez, but I also added, if Freddie Peralta becomes available, David Stearns needs to be aggressive. And that's what ended up happening. Trade over Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat. That's a pretty good package. Bring Freddie Peralta, and I'm glad they got Tobias Myers in that deal too, because I think he's going to actually play a big, big role, kind of a swingman for the Mets here. So you add Peralta to the top. Everyone else can kind of notch down, take a little pressure off the kid, Nolan McLean, although, I mean, he pitched in a big pressure situation last night, and I thought he looked pretty good. I know he gave up the home run, which to me, I think is maybe the one bugaboo that McLean's going to have to work on. He is nasty. I saw the batters. I don't know if you saw the batters' view of his sweeper last night. That looks like Bugs Bunny type of shit. Like, that is insane. Like, I don't know how anyone hits that. And the fastball, which last year was around 95, this year is clocking in around 98. So I like that 1-2 punch with Peralta and McLean. Now, McLean's a kid, right? So as far as how he goes through an entire major league season, we don't know yet, right? Is he going to be able to make 30 starts? Do they even want him to do that? Or are they going to kind of pump the brakes at some point during the season, or maybe just decrease his outings a little bit? Like, there hasn't been much talk about that from McLean, but I'm sure that's being discussed. And that's why I like the rotation being long and having options past the first 5. David Peterson, Clay Holmes, I feel like those guys are dependable. You know what you're going to get. I know David Peterson hit a wall last year. I still very much believe in him. And we'll see how he comes out of the gate if he looks better. Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga both feel like wild cards here, but now we're 6. I just mentioned 6 guys. We're 6 deep there. So we know their ceilings are both very high. We've seen it in Mets uniforms. Kodai Senga the other day looked really, really good. Manaea yesterday threw 4 shutout innings. He might not have even given up any hits either, but he was clocked at around 88 miles per hour on his fastball. So despite the great line, I was like, 88 miles per hour. Ugh. I mean, he's not a hard thrower, but that's like 4 miles per hour less than he was last year. So we'll see. The book is out on him. I mean, there have been some people out there saying, I think Sean Manaea is going to go back to being more of a bullpen guy. And I mean, the Mets probably could use a little help there. So who knows how he progressed there. But Christian Scott also coming back. We don't yet know. I mean, I don't think he's going to start with the big league club. I think they'll let him kind of continue on his comeback a little bit. But what we have seen of him in springs looked really, really good. So optimistic there, gives us more depth. Jonah Tong will start in AAA. Obviously got his feet wet in the majors, and the majors was the only stop where he looked very human. Before that, he was just lighting the world on fire, trying to add some pitches to his repertoire, because last year he's basically a 2-pitch pitcher. Mentioned Tobias Myers will probably start in the bullpen, can fill multiple roles. I mentioned the bullpen a little bit. Okay, I think that is the piece of the team where any Mets haters are going to look at that and be like, yeah, you guys are going to get destroyed here. Right, you lose Edwin Diaz, which was pretty upsetting and I think pretty unexpected as well. And now you have Devin Williams there, who people will try to dunk on. I mean, Yankee fans are the first pitch that Devin Williams threw in a Mets uniform in spring was hit for a home run, and obviously all the tweets went out. All the Yankee fans were like laughing hysterically. But here's the thing: since then, he has not given up a run. Just 2 additional hits, 30% K rate, 1.80 ERA for the spring. So he's looked fine, but the real test will be when the lights are on, a night game, big moment early in the season. Can he get it done? Because we know he struggled there in pinstripes. I like that they have Luke Weaver there to kind of fall back on if the Devin Williams stuff is not going well. Weaver's looked good, but some of these guys are throwing so few innings that it's really such a small sample size. 0 ERA, but just 3 innings for Weaver so far in spring training games. And just to go a little further into the bullpen, they've at least built depth. I mean, AJ Minter will eventually be back. He was fantastic for them before he got hurt, and I love that signing. I just hope he can stay healthy. There are other guys that people aren't thinking about. Obviously, Craig Kimbrell, who seems like he's a million years old now, is in camp. We'll see if he gets a spot. Adbert Alzolay, who people forget the Mets traded for, like, I think when he was hurt, or maybe they signed him when he was hurt. I'd have to look back to confirm that. But he's basically been rehabbing with them for a year. He's back healthy. And remember, when he's in a Cubs uniform, he did a pretty nice job as closer. So we'll see where they use him, but more depth there. There's other names that most fans wouldn't know unless you're a hardcore Met fan. Nate Lavender, Ryan Lambert, They did bring in Carl Edwards Jr., so they have options. Those other two guys, Lavender and Lambert, really nasty stuff, just kind of trying to add some polish on their game. But I think if you point to a weak point, it has to be the bullpen until they prove themselves. But I don't know. I really look at the roster and I like what I see, and I'm very, very optimistic. When you look at the Mets as an outside observer, but also a New Yorker, watches plenty of Mets baseball, what stands out to you?
The biggest thing going into this year for me is how they reshape the clubhouse and seeing how new personalities are in here. You have a lot of different guys that they are professional players, the Jorge Polancos, the Marcus Semins of the world. You mentioned Bo Bichette, but this is a fully different team. The leadership is different at this point. Pete Alonso's gone. He's donning a different type of orange. You mentioned Edwin Diaz. So this is a different clubhouse. There's a lot of talent from 1 through 9. They certainly can win games offensively. You mentioned Juan Soto, one of the best players in the league. The projections are there. He controls the game in a lot of ways. And it's going to be interesting to watch the dynamic of this clubhouse, because whether people want to buy into it or not, clearly there was an issue with the vibes, and it's hard to quantify that with the advanced statistics. And by all accounts, you brought in a lot of professional hitters, and they couldn't be any more diametrically different going into here. And for you, the bullpen thing, you touched upon all the points, so I don't want to reiterate all of them. Looking at the bullpen, that is the biggest question mark, because you're going from Edwin Diaz to Devin Williams, and a lot of us, especially when we're so close to it here in New York, you'd think of all the blowups that Devin Williams had here, blowing saves and not being able to come up clutch when it mattered. But if you dive deep on Devin Williams' numbers, there were a lot of ugly moments, but he steadied the ship at some points of the year where, again, maybe low pressure, maybe it just didn't work out with the Yankees. For him to go over the Mets and have a secure role there, and like you mentioned, Luke Weaver, it could just be different and work out for him. Most of his career, it's worked out. If you think about Devin Williams' his full resume, last year was the outlier. Everything else is more of a player he has been.
Yeah, I think he's the guy who could benefit just from a really quick start, like maybe getting some big save situations early and knock them all out of the park, and that confidence factor, right?
The other thing,
New York. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing was the defense. I'm interested to see how they were, because last year they were below average in most of the key areas, and now you're having guys play in positions that they haven't played in. Maybe, as you mentioned, Soto switching the outfield position that will help him defensively. He certainly looked good in the WBC as well. He looked better defensively, in my opinion. But they need to be better defensively, and maybe losing Pete Alonso. And I know Jorge Polanco is not used to playing first base, but maybe he might wind up being an upgrade over Pete Alonso when it's all said and done. Who knows?
Yeah, and like there was a lot of talk when Alonso was let go of, like, how do you replace 40 home runs or whatever, 35 home runs, 120 RBIs? Not that he did that every year, but just say, and I get it, like that is hard to replace, but I don't look at this lineup and feel like, oh man, the lack of power is going to kill him. Like Francisco Lindor is a 25 to 30 home run guy most years. Juan Soto is a 30 to 40 home run guy, maybe more on some years. Bo Bichette is a professional hitter. He might not light up the home run number every year, but he's like barely anybody in the league could hit 300 last year. Like if things go well, you might have a few guys in this lineup. Like Carson Bench is showing he might have the tools of a 300 hitter. Bo Bichette, we know, can do that. Like, I think offensively, I understand you lose the 40 bombs from Pete Alonso. I get it. But Nimmo hit a pretty decent amount as well, I think mid-20s. So, yeah, you have that to replace. But I think some of the other guys are bringing other things, like putting the ball in play, clutch situations, getting runners in from third with less than 2 outs. I don't know. I like this group of professional hitters that I feel like I'm watching in front of me. And then I do think we should mention that Bo Bichette, just kind of like people dunked on Devin Williams when he gave up that early spring training home run. People dunked on Bo Bichette when he got a ground ball. It was like the first spring training game he was playing third base. He throws the ball like slightly up the line. Whoever playing was first base should have came off the bag. It wasn't that hard of a play. And they just missed getting the out because the ball popped out the first baseman's glove. And everyone was like, look, oh my God, the Bo Bichette experiment at third base can be so terrible. Like, I've seen him make some nice plays, and I haven't heard any talk about his defense at third since that play, which was many weeks ago. So obviously things have gotten quiet there, but I'm excited to see him in orange blue. My biggest concern, honestly, with Bo is, like, I hope he's here for more than a year. And that's a whole different discussion. But the way the contract is laid out, I'm hoping this is not just a 1-year thing and we have to kind of go back to the drawing board. I know we have like Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty, who we could talk about as well. You can fall back on Ronnie Mauricio. So if he does go, hopefully one of those guys pop. Beatty, I'm excited. I feel like he had a little bit of a breakout second half, and it looks like he's going to be playing in a few different spots. But he seems content and confident in camp when I watch him, no matter where he is. And at the plate, really looks like a more fully realized guy. Vientos will be interesting to see how he performs as a guy that will probably mostly come off the bench and get starts here and there. He's a power guy. That's his calling card. Is he going to be able to do that off the bench, or is that going to kind of increase the struggles that he can have? An important year for Carlos Mendoza, too. People started getting on his case big time last year with the underperformance, with his bullpen usage. We heard Adam Ottavino had some not very nice things to say after the season about his experience with Carlos Mendoza. And they have Kai Correa now as their bench coach, who is a pretty popular candidate as a future manager or guy in a big position. So, like, you kind of feel like maybe looking over your shoulder there. But again, I think there's more to like about this Mets roster, and like you said, the clubhouse changes, than there is to dislike. And I can't wait to see how the pitching staff looks now. Freddie Peralta looks in a Mets uniform, but I did send this out kind of like we did, I think, for the AL West. I did this. I tried to reach out to a few different people on Twitter and get their thoughts on filling in the blank here. Like, this team will win the division if, and then finish the sentence. So actually 2 Mets accounts got back to me here. Mets Metrics at Mets Metrics was the first. The Mets will win the NL East if. At first, he just told me if they stay healthy. And then he said, do you want me to expand it? I said, yes, because to be honest, a few people said that to me for different teams. And there's like more than half the league you could say that for. But it is more complicated than that. So he did expand, and he did a nice job of it. He went on to say the Mets will win the NL East if the young players can take a step forward and contribute nicely at the major league level. The Mets have a bunch of players with great potential who are 26 years old or younger, who have yet to fully break out, between Francisco Alvarez, Carson Bench, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, Mark Vientos, Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, and Christian Scott, along with prospects that could be close to debuting that we're leaving out. If the Mets can get more out of their younger players, this team will go very far and will win the NL East. And he makes a good point. They have some really, really good veterans, but that's a lot of young talent that we just went through. And you need a couple of them to pop and help those established vets out. We also had Till Mets Do Us Part. He gave a shorting answer, but it's a little bit of a different one, and one that's super important. The Mets will win the NL East if the starting pitching gives length, thus not burning out the bullpen. So thank you to those guys for contributing. Check them both out on Twitter, and Till Mets Do Us Part, also podcast. So check them out there. The over-under here to finish up on the Mets, 90.5. It's a tough number, man. Like, obviously, they won 83 games last year. So to go to 90.5, you have to be confident that they have made a pretty big leap here. I am going over, and it's partly to do with the standings prediction. I feel like I have to go over with where I have them. It's not going to be easy, but I'm gonna believe in some of the depth they've built here, their star power as well. And I feel like things go right this year. Over. And by the way, if you're just listening to us for the first time and you think, oh, this guy with the Mets hat, Mets homer. No, I'm pretty hard on the Mets. I definitely didn't pick them to win the division last year. I like to try to be as unbiased as I possibly can be. My X factor is Bo Bichette. So much talk about defense, run prevention, like you mentioned. What will he look like full time at third, right? When he's playing night in, night out every single day. And can he stay healthy? Because we know we saw the knee get banged up, things like that. You want that guy to be on the field every day, along with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor.
So the thing is about a lot of these teams in this division, you probably could say the same thing about all the teams, like the injury thing you mentioned, but the range of outcomes for the New York Mets is wide. I think this team has a high variance of being a contender or not. And you mentioned the pitching, and I could see it reasonably going both ways. And that's a crazy thing to say about a team that has World Series aspirations. And looking at some of the projections, I don't think experts know what end is up with this New York Mets team. It's going to take a little bit of time to find our footing on who they'll be. And I think it's because, again, like we mentioned, this identity has yet to be determined. Of course, Carlos Mendoza is still there as the manager, but a lot of those faces that have been really steady characters in this Met clubhouse are no longer there. And we'll see if we can get a little bit more out of the pitching, because that's certainly going to be an X factor. I have Nolan McLean, but I do think Bo Bichette's a big piece as well. I like what we saw for Nolan McLean. I think at this point he has 8 big league starts, so he's going to have to build on a resume and get to a point where he can be relied on. But let's not forget Freddie Peralta is there as well to pick up the slack. So I do like where they're going as far as the rotation goes. But as far as another team with high variance, I guess it's time to move over to the Atlanta Braves. And the story of the Atlanta Braves this year is going to be recalibration, because Murphy's Law type of stuff last year, they're still very much the same core that have defined Atlanta over the past several years. If you look at that, the continuity shows up immediately. You look at the top of the roster. When you think about the Atlanta Braves, you think about Ronald Acuna Jr. He's one of the more impactful players in the sport. Everyone is high on him going into this season. The projections are there. Feels like this is the year when you start bouncing back and forth. Like there's the down year and then there's the up year. This feels like we're there. He's a true franchise anchor that raises the floor of the entire offense. And again, you go with the other names in there, Austin Riley, Michael Harris, the same thing down the line with Drake Baldwin and Ozzie Albies. There's a lot to like when all these guys are clicking. But at the same time, when we saw last year, everything broke in the wrong direction. And what they were praised for with the athleticism and the two-way value of keeping these guys together, it all fell apart pretty quickly. And those are the questions that you're coming into to overcome really what is a disaster of a year last year. And looking at the growth, for me, I'm looking at a Drake Baldwin. He gives Atlanta a legitimate offensive production behind the plate, which is a huge thing in 2026 MLB, to have a catcher that can hit at that level. I think there's a big piece of this Atlanta lineup that needs more depth, to not rely on guys when they go down, to have this kind of going in a circle here, because the Ozzie Albies of the world, the Austin Rileys, like the Matt Olson, we didn't mention him as well. The projections are all there. The power should be there. But like we said last year, I think a lot of Braves fans got to see it to believe it. On the pitching side, a lot of the underlying indicators suggest there's more upside than the surface level would imply. I think a lot of people, again, similar to the offense, you probably expect a little bit more. Atlanta's rotation, despite the struggles we had last year, they ranked 5th in strikeouts per 9 innings, which we know the swing and miss ability from this rotation. And at the top, of course, we're going to look at Chris Sale. There's question marks around Spencer Strider, Reynaldo Lopez providing some stability behind them. But again, is he able to repeat what he did last year? And then for the bullpen, Raisel Iglesias, the acquired Robert Suarez, reinforcing the bullpen. That's going to be a good conversation to have about leverage and can they get the ball to them. But I think the Braves have a reliable path to close games better than they did last year when you bring Suarez in. And importantly, you look at the organizational identity. You look at this team. This is 16 homegrown players on a 40-man roster. There is continuity here. There is a very much a contender in this team. But I think because of last year, there's some question marks, maybe not just out in the outwardly world where all experts and projections and stuff. I think inside, how do you not question everything that went down last year and go into that with until you start to prove that you can win on a consistent level during 2026? They're going to have to shake that off, in my opinion. There's a little bit of rust that's coming into this year.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Murphy's Law last year. To be honest, this season has kind of started the same way before it's even started. You got the Jurickson Profar BS that's completely 100% his fault. But you also have the Hurston Waldrep like injury banged up, Spencer Schwellenbach, which is the bigger deal. When will we see him again this season? I think the Braves are hoping sometime in the second half. I think it's a little optimistic to think earlier, but that guy was a stud. I mean, I don't like the Braves as a Met fan. I think that's an obvious statement. But watching him, I was like, man, I love the way this guy pitches. Like, he was just different. And for him now to be dealing with all these injuries, it's unfortunate. So, like, they're already feeling a little snake bit again. Ronald Acuna, obviously, the 2 major leg injuries over the last, 4 years or so. But he's also had that 40 home run, 70 stolen base year mixed in there, too. We know the ceiling is just ultra high, basically as high as it gets for him. You just want him to stay healthy. Obviously looked fine, jumping up and down like crazy with Venezuela multiple times in the World Baseball Classic. So you hope he's over that stuff and it doesn't rear its ugly head. A lot of bounce back stories, whether it be Acuna, whether it be Michael Harris, who basically was only good for 1 month of the season offensively last year. You can go up and down the lineup, but again, like the lineup is good, but then you see spots where it leaves a lot left to be desired. I mean, right now their DH penciled in on roster resources is Dom Smith. The bench is nothing to write home about. Jonah Heim, Jorge Mateo, Brett Wisely, Eli White. So like you kind of said, like their depth is a little scary, and they've had a lot of injuries. So like it's hard to say like, oh, they'll stay healthy, they'll be really good. Pitching wise, again, the 5 they have in there is not the worst thing. I mean, Chris Sale won the Cy Young not too long ago. If he's healthy, he's one of the best in the game still. I don't really care how old he is. Spencer Strider is kind of a mystery. I think everyone thought he'd come back from Tommy John last year and light the world on fire again. It just hasn't happened. the velocity thing. It's, there's that story where they turned the velocity image off during one of his spring starts because they didn't want people to see it. They obviously denied it, but the velocity clearly down. I don't know. Is Spencer Strider still on his way back to being a star, or is he just going to be a slightly above average pitcher or average pitcher? They need more than that. Reynaldo Lopez, again, also coming back from big injury. He had just turned into a starter. So there's been rumors of they may actually bring him back to the bullpen. But at this point, because of depth, I don't think they can. Grant Holmes has looked really, really good, really, really good in spring, but he also has some injury scares. So you're living on the edge here. I think, though, they may have found their savior in Didier Fuentes, the 20-year-old kid. This guy is going absolutely insane in spring training. Pitched again today. In spring as a whole, he has faced 27 hitters. 26 of them have been retired. 17 strikeouts, 0 hits, 0 walks. The only base runner was 1 hit by pitch. So he's basically almost pitched a perfect game over the course of several different outings. The whiff percentage is way up there. He's lighting guys up. I mean, I put some of the highlight reel on a tweet today. If you're listening to this, you want to go check it out. The stuff is absolutely nasty. I believe struck out 8 guys in 4 innings today. Whatever's going on between he and Jeremy Hefner, they had video of them sitting next to during the outing. He's pulling magic out of this kid. And I don't think he was in their plans to start on the major league team, but there's a chance he forces their hand. I don't know who they'd pull out. Maybe it's Bryce Elder, right? He's always kind of the back and forth AAA major league guy on the bus lot. I don't know what the option situation is with Elder, but Fuentes might be their savior with what was looking like, oh my gosh, if one more guy goes down, we're in big time trouble. So I'm confused by the Braves. This team, while researching and looking things up, preparing for all these episodes, I think this is the team that I went back and forth with as far as playoffs or not playoffs more than any other team. Again, it's still in my head, even though I have written down my predictions. I'm going back and forth as I talk about them.
It's so interesting because you think about this Atlanta core and we praise them for locking them up, and they do have the World Series under their belt, but they finished 18th in batting average last year, 12th in OBP, 13th in OPS. When are we able to say this is a clear step back from elite lineup? They're no longer there. And I guess the outlier would be the fact that they would get back there. They still have the star power, but you mentioned the depth not being overwhelming as far as pitching goes. Dom Smith, you mentioned potentially being a DH, but the other option is Mauricio Dubon. And there's if those guys are getting meaningful at bats in a lineup, something is drastically wrong. Obviously, Jerickson Profar, as you mentioned, the 162 game suspension, but the injuries to Sean Murphy, Hassan Kim also, there's a lot of things already starting, as you mentioned, to break the wrong way. And I really look at this team too. I don't know. When do we close the book on this core? And is it now? Because looking at the way it all broke, and we could be sitting here having a completely different conversation if the first month this Braves lineup comes out and hits. They're full of professional hitters, the Matt Olsons of the world. But I think for a lot of people, I mean, they're no longer a defining force in the division. They're not along in the National League. This is a team that's absolutely very much a question mark coming in here. And people are also, similar to the Mets, people are spread out about this where everyone's confident that potentially they could bounce back, but there's a lot of bounce back that needs to happen. And on top of that, the injury, you mentioned Hurston Waldrop, but Spencer Swellen back, AJ Smith-Shawver, it's all over the place here. And maybe it becomes this institutional thing where, I don't know, does Robert Suarez save this bullpen? And all of a sudden you have Raisel Iglesias and Robert Suarez shorten the games. And all of a sudden this Braves is a different lineup, only having to score 4 runs a game instead of having to beat people to death offensively. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there are positives here. I mean, I love the Suarez signing and the back end of the bullpen. I mean, that's pretty damn solid. I know Iglesias probably has taken a little bit of a step back, but now he doesn't have to be that lockdown closer. He'll save some games, I'm sure, when Suarez is not available, but that's a nice 1-2 punch there at the back. And Mike Yastrzemski also, we haven't really mentioned him, has looked very, very good in spring. One of the best hitters in spring, has kind of switched things up a little bit. He looks like a guy that might be unlocked and have one of the best seasons of his career. Obviously a better hitter's park too. Than it was in San Francisco. And I know he had to stop with Kansas City, I think last year, as well after the deadline. But I don't know. It's the bullpen I like. And then honestly, the top 3 teams in this division there's a little back and forth and they're kind of hard to figure because they all have their own very difficult questions to answer. And you said based on where they placed in statistics last year, 18th, you said for one of them, like maybe they're not an elite offensive team. I think they still are when they're healthy. But if you can't get the Ronald Acuñas and Austin Rileys and Ozzy Albies in the lineup at the same time consistently, obviously that changes things. If Michael Harris is going to be the player he was for most of the season offensively, that's a problem. He's going to play great defense. But and Mauricio Dubon, you mentioned his name. He will be the starting shortstop when the season opens because Hassan Kim, another guy got hurt preseason. I think he'll be back by May, not a long-term thing, but he was
too many cigarettes.
signing.
Too many cigarettes. He loves the cigarettes.
He was a signing that fans were happy about, and he'll miss a month. Dubon's an amazing defender, by the way. Like, go look at his defensive metrics, so you'll love him there. But probably not gonna hit as well as Kim might. But yeah, the jury's out. But did you get the over under there, or you want me to find it for you quick to look at that?
I'll pull it up. And just talking about the lineup for itself, for a lot of Braves fans out there listening. Again, things could shift on a dime because how they started last year is sort of riding this narrative. They never got off. And again, you could talk about, as we mentioned with Devin Williams, there were some moments he got right. Same thing with Michael Harris. There were parts of this lineup that started to hit, but the Braves are too far out of it to really make it matter. I don't know. There's a culture there that, again, you want to believe. You look at the uniform, like we're trained as 90s kids to just accept that they're going to win games. But it's hard for me to get to that point. For over under wins, they have 88.5 from Bet MGM. So 88.5 is a big number to get to that point for 2026. Yeah. Where are you at with it?
I'm on the under. I'm firmly on the under. I just think there's too many questions for a long season. And even the guys that are healthy, like Chris Sale's age, the Spencer Strider stuff thing is strange. And even it started off with the pitching, which was bad enough. And it's creeped into some of the offense too. And there's just too much history lately of the injuries not really stopping. So I'm firmly on the under for the Braves right now.
I feel like I am too. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to make the postseason if things break right. But I think 88.5 is a very ambitious number to put on a team that had a lot of the struggles we saw and all the question marks. But let's move over to the Philadelphia Phillies. This is a team that could have been in flux, but it seems like most of the band is being brought back together. I'll let you take the lead on them.
Yeah, and that's like literally exactly how I was going to start. When they were eliminated in ridiculously heartbreaking fashion with the Orion Kerkering flub, I guess you could call it, trying to throw to home when we shouldn't have and just throwing it right past JT Realmuto. I think that game ended and Phillies fans and other baseball fans were like, all right, that's kind of the last chapter of that specific Phillies book. Like there might be some characters that cross over into a spinoff, right? But a lot of them are going to be gone. And it didn't really happen. Kyle Schwarber's back. JT Realmuto's back. The one guy that did get away is Ranger Suarez, but the pitching is still, pretty solid, especially if one guy proves he's healthy, which we'll talk about in a minute. But, my question looking at them, and another team that I'm analyzing and having a hard time really trying to put my finger on what I think they're going to be able to do this year. How much production do you get out of that core of Harper, Schwarber, Realmuto, and Trey Turner as another, all of them another year older? Realmuto, not the player he used to be by any means. So I don't think he's a main cog anymore. He's more of a clubhouse presence, kind of the part of the fabric. Trey Turner, he's been a little back and forth year to year. Improved his defense big time last year, which before last year, people were kind of starting to talk about like, we got to take him off a shortstop. But it's a nice four. I mean, there would be a lot of teams or fans of teams would kill to have those four guys as part of your core. But Harper, obviously the huge story like Dombrowski kind of calling out saying we don't know if he's going to be a lead anymore. And honestly, I don't think Dombrowski should have said that, but I get it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Bryce Harper will be a lead. I know he had that huge home run, obviously, last night. Kind of a shame that it's probably going to get a little forgotten about based, because one inning later or half inning later, they lost the lead and lost. But there were times he and Schwarber in the WBC looked like they didn't look great. And I know it's early. Schwarber, Aaron Judge is getting all the shit today, but Kyle Schwarber should be thankful that Aaron Judge also didn't hit well last night because Schwarber looked terrible in some big spots. Like he didn't look like he could hit a fastball over 95. And there's a lot of those in big leagues nowadays. So he is the type of guy who can look really bad and then literally a day later be crushing 3 home runs in the same game. So I'm not going to pile on him, but you do have to wonder if that core has not gotten it done previously, if they seem to have a certain spot that they can get to and then they plateau. What makes us think that a year later and a year older, that's going to change? So then you look at some of the pieces that have changed, which is not all that much. Adolis Garcia is brought in. Okay. An Adolis Garcia bounce back could make this team really, really good. Not just pretty good, not just good. It could make him really, really good. And there's reason for optimism because it's a much better hitter's ballpark. Maybe he rakes at Citizens Bank ballpark. Or maybe he's legitimately just in his decline phase and it doesn't matter where he plays. Need to see that before I believe it. I don't love the second half of the order, if I'm being honest here. It just feels like another team, kind of like I just said, that'll be plenty good during most parts of the regular season, but has the ability to disappear offensively at any point, right? Like, all right, we can kind of pitch around Bryce if he's hot. We can pitch around Schwarber if he's hot, and then try to go after these guys. You're looking at Alec Baum again. Thought he'd be gone by now from Philly. We're looking, or Bohm, however you say it. You're looking at Brandon Marsh. You're looking at Bryson Stott. Adolis Garcia is going to be somewhere in the second half as well. JT Realmuto will be down there. Maybe Justin Crawford, right? And that, I don't know. That doesn't scream like this team is going to go beat the Dodgers in the NLCS. They need Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller to energize this team at some point. Justin Crawford, I believe, is much, much more likely to start the season in the bigs. I don't know if that's a definite, but it's a possibility. And I think we'll get that news rather soon. I'm seeing a lot of news breaking today of like certain guys sent back or certain guys making the team. So if it hasn't broken, maybe soon. He's hit 244 in the spring, 41 at bats, no home runs, 2 RBIs, 3 stolen bases. So we'll see. But the outfield has felt like a question for Philadelphia for like the last decade. I'm not a Philly fan, so it might feel like longer for Philly fans than that. It just feels like it's been an issue for so long, getting kind of star power out there or more production. But obviously Nick Castellanos gone as well, so that's something worth mentioning. I kind of hinted towards this before when I talked a little bit about the pitching staff being the best part of this team. It starts with Zach Wheeler. His return to this team is as meaningful as any player on any team this year. He was throwing around 93 miles per hour the other day, which is good for him at this time of year, just kind of ramping up. Lots of positive signs. So he is throwing, looks like throwing, like getting ready to pitch in games soon, not just kind of tossing around. Opening day, for the most part, probably unlikely, but people are talking about maybe mid-April if everything continues going really well. And I think Philly fans are going to take that. If you get Zach Wheeler just being the guy we've seen, again, this team goes from good to really, really good. The pitching staff, even without Wheeler, is the clear strength. You put Christopher Sanchez and the newly extended Jesus Luzardo at the top. That's fantastic, almost as good as it gets. You add Wheeler to that mix if he's right, and now it's as good as it gets. I think if Wheeler is not all the way back this year, if there's some hiccups, if he comes back but he's not completely himself, they'll need either an Aaron Nola bounce back or an Andrew Painter breakout, one or the other, to really be as good as they hope to be. Because by no means are they in a rebuild here like we thought. Maybe they will retool or something like that. No, they're still very much going for it and hoping the window is open there. When you have those pitchers, how could it not be? Back end of the bullpen looks solid. You get a full year of Duran out there. That's exciting. He was great coming over for them. You have to wonder how the prior mentioned Orion Kerkering looks this year after that debacle. I just worry, even if he looks good at first, when he comes back, because I think he's working through injury as well, or slow ramp up, something like that. But if he comes back and is great at first, all it takes for me to be worried about a guy like that with what just happened is the first time he blows up and blows a lead and you get some Philly boos. I don't know. I think it's going to be a big time mental game for him. And hopefully he's kind of already gotten ahead of that and worked on that part of the game. But those are my thoughts when I look at the Phillies roster. Obviously the Wheeler thing really, really stands out front and center. And the other thing is just I don't know, the same core, we're trying it again. I'm not sure if that was the right idea or not.
Yeah, Wheeler is my X factor for sure. Because you mentioned the rotation arguably being the biggest strength of this entire roster. Watch what they did last year, finishing second in ERA, fifth in WHIP, second in walk per nine, second in K per nine. And again, they lost Ranger Suarez, but again, looking at the team, you look at Zach Wheeler. If he's back, this team takes a whole nother jump to a new level. I'm a little bit higher on this offensive profile, like depth wise for me. I do like these bats, Alec Boehm and Adolis Garcia. I do think he's going to have a bounce back year here. Bryson Stott. I think for me, again, it does funnel directly to through Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. So there is some of that, as you mentioned, being able to pitch around these guys. And that is the, I guess, the crown that Trey Turner has to overcome. Like, he has to be a superstar player as well. And we've seen that from him. His projections this year look like he's going to return to that. If he's that guy, and then you can start a funnel with all these players, I think the depth will be good enough to potentially compete. And I think comparing it to the Dodgers, that might not be a fair benchmark here in the National League, but this team is every bit as capable of making it to the National League Championship Series with this core. Schwarber, of course, like, for me, watching what he did last year, in any other year, he could potentially have been the NL MVP. Of course, we're living in Shohei Ohtani's world, but Kyle Schwarber is just electric. I know he had a bad WBC, but I fully expect him to come out there and just smash balls. That's what he does. I'm curious what this team does. You mentioned Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller. There's some legitimate impact waiting in the pipeline. And I think this actually is the year we get it. I think we're going to have some of those impacts coming this year. And Jesus Luzardo, I think we may get an Aaron Nola bounce back. What's the WBC effect of him pitching for Team Italy with the confidence? Because he certainly looked good in large spurts there. Looking at this bullpen, you mentioned Duran. There is some question marks I have. Like you mentioned, Ryan Kerkering bounce back here. How is he affected by last year? And also looking at Jose Alvarado, how is he going to be able to continue? He needs to improve the command. Looking at his walks, it was not great last year. They have to be able to protect leads, but having Duran at the back end is going to be the deodorizer for it, where you're able to look at just get him the ball. That's the main thing. Get him the ball with a lead. He is an elite closer. His potential to be a top 2 closer this year by when it's all said and done, especially for a team fantasy wise. When I talk about a closer that's going to have opportunities to get saves, it's a guy like that. But the story is running it back with this core. As you mentioned, this is a one more reunion tour. Don't miss the sellouts and come see them play in concert, because who knows how much longer these guys are going to be playing together in the same capacity. Can they beat the Dodgers? I guess that's a whole other conversation, and maybe it's not a fair one to have, but I do believe that this National League East could be theirs if everything breaks right. And chances are that's a conversation we're having about every single team in the top end of this division.
Yeah, no doubt. I brought the manager back too, which again, I was a little surprised by. Like, really pretty much brought most back, shipped off Nick Castellanos, let Ranger Suarez walk. But you mentioned, I agree. I think it's the year some of that youth is going to come up and have to help for this team to kind of be able to push a little further. They won 96 games last year. Over under is 89.5. I'll tell you what I'm taking on that in a minute, but I do want to include this. I reached out to, again, I didn't get it for all the teams, but I'm trying to reach out to different people for their opinion, so it's not just me, some outsider perspective of fans or people that follow the teams extra closely, night in, night out, podcasters, things like that, writers. Our good friend Nick, tunes in to most of the live shows, right? Big fan of Nick here. At Bird Talks Ball, I believe is the handle. I reached out to him. He's our Phillies fan here that listens. So he put it this way: the Phillies will win the NL East if the rotation can stay healthy, and if the pitching can create value that the back half of the batting order cannot. So basically saying the pitching is going to have to pick up some of the slack for the second half of the order, which I kind of mentioned as well. I don't necessarily love it. And then he kind of tried to put it a different way too. He said basically elite pitching has to compensate for a bad outfield. And when he says a bad outfield, I think he's talking about the offensive production, which again is another thing I pointed to, and it's been kind of a problem for a while. Over under is 89.5. So when you see the 96 game win total last year, I think a lot of people would call that a slam dunk. I don't know, man. Something feels off here. The vibe just feels off for me for Philadelphia. You had spring training starting with Bryce Harper very openly talking about how he was not pleased with Dave Dombrowski, basically not keeping things in-house, and said when I signed here, like part of it was like we agreed like everything stays with us, and Dombrowski, I think, came in the middle of Bryce Harper's time. I'm pretty sure wasn't there when they signed him, and he's kind of changed his ways about that. Like, there's a part of me that could see Bryce, if things don't go well in the beginning of the season, they get off to a slow start or hit the skid somewhere. There's part of me that could see Bryce Harper like get really unhappy and feel like, you know what, like I'm getting to the point where I want to be in a place I'm happy and I want to have a good shot at winning a World Series. Like, hey, can you look to send me elsewhere? Now, if they get off to a great start, I think that can not even be a possibility. But I worry about the team between the Kerkering stuff, the Wheeler question, and Bryce Harper. Is he truly still going to be happy there? I'd be a little concerned if I was a Philadelphia fan. Again, the vibe just feels off. So I'm taking the under. The X factor, I agree with you. It's Zach Wheeler. I did cheat a little bit and say Bryce Harper too. Took 2 for obvious reasons we kind of mentioned already. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but we'll see. I need to see these guys on the field.
You mentioned the ages, just to put it out there. Bryce Harper's 33, Schwarber's 33, JT Realmuto's 35, and Trey Turner is 32. So youth will eventually have to be infused in this lineup because they are aging in several key spots. So we have to figure that out. The other way to fit Bryce Harper into this conversation, he obviously went around with shaking hands with the gold medal or the championship winning Venezuela team. But there's also news about him having a conversation that looked pretty calm with Rob Manfred on the field after the game. I'm not sure if you saw that. So maybe they're making amends going forward to this labor lockout situation.
Can I ask you something very quickly? What are your thoughts? This is an aside. I know this is one of our longer division episodes. Sorry, but we still have 2 teams to go through. But I do want to ask you this question very quickly. What did you think of a few of the players very quickly removing their silver medal, like before they were off camera?
I don't blame them at all. I love it. It's exactly what Team Canada did in the Olympics by getting the stuffed animal and looking at it and being like, what is this? They were respectful when they got it. They didn't throw it away. Everyone's making a lot of that with Mason Miller taking it off and Schwarber taking it off, but they didn't want it. And it shows how much the WBC means. Everyone's saying that this Team USA team didn't care. That couldn't be further from the truth. They just celebrate differently.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. All right. Well, let's go. Let's get back to the division. And they were playing those games in Miami, which as electric as we've seen that stadium, right? So let's head to the Miami Marlins and then break these guys apart here.
So we're in South Beach here, the home of the 2-time World Series champions. They're entering 2026. We've been mentioning some of the feels of these teams. They're caught in between the middle of 2 timelines, in my opinion. They're not fully rebuilding, but we know they're not fully formed yet. You could see the emergence of the core last year, which was exciting for baseball fans, not just Marlins fans. There was some exciting baseball happening in South Beach last year. But what makes them compelling isn't what they are right now. I think watching this roster develop over the course of the next few years is what I'm going to be watching with them. And I know that's what a lot of Marlins fans don't want to hear. They want to hear about a contender, but that's just not where we're at this point. Building this team, there's clearly an image of Peter Bendix of what they want this team to be, an emphasis on athleticism, versatility, and lineup flexibility. Looking at them last year, they were middle of the pack in most offensive stuff, but the underlying structure of this team suggests that this team could be well-versed and be a pesky team down the line, similar to the Rays profile when they were a contender. Xavier Edwards, Jacob Marcy, these are players that could be top of the order bats that they're not going to be driving the ball out of the ballpark, but they're going to be controlling the game and controlling the pace. And that, as we've seen in a small dose of Venezuela in the WBC, that can win over the course of 162 games. You have an ability to develop what is an identity. And that's what the Marlins have been lacking for a while. But really what I'm looking at is the middle of this order where you start to see the upside in a big way. Kyle Stowers, Agustin Ramirez, those 2 guys I'm looking at as potentially could be superstar players. Kyle Stowers, I mean, he profiles as probably Miami's most complete hitter. He's capable of the power that we see. And also the biggest thing is maintaining on-base profile, being able to be a guy that doesn't strike out too much, being able to be a complete player. And for Ramirez as well, we talk about playing behind the plate. Maybe being a catcher is not his full-time gig going forward. Maybe he'll be a DH. Maybe he'll play first base for the full time. 24 years old. There's still room for growth offensively. So I'm excited to see him there. And then you're looking at players like the volatility players in this lineup for this year. Christopher Morel, Connor Norby, not finished products, of course, but they represent the type of players that this year can outperform maybe the projections in the right environment. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Owen Casey. Of course, Owen Casey, a guy that we saw on the stage for Team Canada and WBC. He was acquired in the Edward Cabrera deal. He has a big potential to be a young, controllable piece that could be joining that core of the Stowers, the Ramirez, Jacob Marcy, these guys that can be eventually And again, he could be here for a long time. Pitching side of things, Sandy Alcantara, of course, is going to be the anchor. What are we going to get from him? Yuri Perez, Braxton Garrett, Max Meyer. And then the bullpen's interesting. Acquiring Pete Fairbanks might be traded at the deadline, but we'll see what he's able to do. He's a defined back end option. But I pass it to you about what else you have on your mind here. Maybe you want to talk about Thomas White or Robbie Snelling. This team is obviously in flux.
Yeah, well, I'll start here. You mentioned Agustin Ramirez maybe not being full-time behind the plate at some point. I think another kid named Joe Mack, who Marlins fans are more than excited about, that's going to come up and be fantastic. Probably the long-time catcher, I think, and maybe split with Agustin Ramirez, kind of Basayo, Adley Rushman situation, or maybe, like you said, Agustin Ramirez moves off catcher, more of a DH. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, that's the point, though. They have other things in the pipeline here. The pitching, I mean, Robbie Snelling, we're all excited to see him. The Marlins have never had a problem developing pitching. A full year of Yuri Perez kind of being healthy. Obviously, that's an exciting thing. Very curious to see where Sandy Alcantara's story goes. A lot of people thought he would not be a Marlin at this point, and that has not happened. They've traded a lot of guys away, but they've kept Sandy. So is that because they want him to show himself as the true Sandy for a few more months and then get a bigger package for him? Or do they really like him being here as a part of this kind of new face? I remember having Jack McMullen, who is the radio voice of the Marlins and also a member of Just Baseball, founding member of Just Baseball. He was one of our guests last year during the season, I believe. And we asked him a question in regards to like, does this team have a face yet? Like, is there a guy on the team that you see as he's not just a pretty good player, but like he can be the face of this team going forward? And honestly, I am starting to see, like, I feel like they're starting to have a core that I could see as being Marlins, hopefully for a long time, that are the most important pieces. And it started with Kyle Stowers, who had a breakout, obviously. Agustin Ramirez, maybe I'm still waiting to see if I feel like he's going to be, I think he's a good player in his own way, super powerful, but I'd put Kyle Stowers and then maybe Owen Casey, like those two. I know Casey just got there, but I feel like he fits that profile. And maybe you add Ramirez in there, you add Yuri Perez on the pitching side, maybe Robbie Snelling, and you're starting to feel like you have these franchise pieces that you can build around. So if I'm a Marlins fan, I'm excited. I think as a Met fan, this is easy for me to say because it's not the first time, but I think they are going to be an absolute pain in the ass to play. Like I think they're, like you said, they're going to be annoying. They're going to be athletic. I think they will be a thorn in the side of those top three teams, or the teams that are supposed to be the top three teams that we talked about earlier. So those are my thoughts on the Marlins. Pretty simple. Some teams are easier to digest than others, and others there's a lot of pieces you have to break down. I don't know. This one I find a little simpler, where it's like really good pitching and they're continuing to develop really good pitching. The offense is a work in progress. I don't think it's going to scare you, but I think it might bug you. And I do think they're starting to get those faces of the franchise.
Yeah, and their over-under is sitting at 72.5, according to BetMGM. So to me, I'm going over. I do like a lot about this team, and I think as you mentioned before, there'll be spurts where they can hang around, maybe in the wild card conversation until they sputter out. The bullpen bothers me outside of Pete Fairbanks. That's going to be a huge issue. I can see them having the strong starting pitching and losing leads. We're going to see a lot of that from the Marlins, but I think for them, it's more about what comes next, because it's hard to define this year. And you don't want, as a Marlins fan, to go out to the ballpark and be told we're going to be good 2 years from now. I think there's small wins you can take on the in-between about this identity of the team. They're not good enough right now as currently constructed to separate from the pack, but I do believe that they're on the right track and you should trust the process. So I have them over, but they're not making the playoffs.
Okay, you said 72 and a half. Yeah, I'd probably go over as well. And we'll get to our standings at the end, but I think at the very least they're going to be a fun team to watch, and they have some very, very exciting players to keep an eye on.
Do you see Pete Fairbanks like fetching a big haul at the deadline? Because that feels like what he was signed for, right?
Well, so he's a Bendix guy too. Like, they have a relationship, and I think he wanted to stay in Florida. So I believe that Bendix truly does value him and likes him, but you can't convince me that he doesn't have in his mind, like, if things don't go well, like, if he's pitching well, I'm going to try to move him. I would think Peter Bendix would, I would think Fairbanks would also kind of realize that might be the situation. It's a 1-year deal. Anytime you see a 1-year deal for a team like that, Like, I don't know. I think you can kind of read the tea leaves there. But I mean, I think the Angels are going to trade their manager, Kurt Suzuki, at the deadline because they gave him a 1-year deal too.
It's like the money ball. I can't perform under a 1-year cloud. But
how do you give a new manager a 1-year deal? That's the we didn't really mention that on the AL West episode. It's so bizarre. Typical like Angels nonsense.
it shows zero faith in what he's doing.
Yeah.
Which is weird because he was the beloved face of who's going to be the type of personality manager. They were super confident in the hire.
I don't know.
But let's head to the nation's capital over here. So to the Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take the lead on this. This is a very interesting team as well. There's a big conversation to have about this core that seems to be developing itself similar to the Marlins, but in a different path.
Yeah, and lots of new faces here as far as management and in the dugout too. When I start looking through this and combing through things and reading different things and looking, wanting to be prepared for the episode, I way more interesting than I think I might have realized, and way more notes taken and things I want to touch upon. So bear with me here. Youngest front office staff in baseball. These guys are young, man. A bunch of baby faces managing this team. Paul Taboni takes over president of baseball operations. He's 35 years old. Blake Butera, who looks like he belongs maybe in high school ball, takes over as manager, 33. So expect a fresh approach here. I think that is easy to say. A clean slate. And the players actually were mentioning how they've actually told the players that, like, this is a clean slate. Like, don't take anything from last year to this year. Like, start new. So you got to like that. One example of how things are going to change, and this can be a new approach, forward thinking. Only one other team threw more fastballs than the Nationals last year. I find this discussion very, very interesting. Expect that to change. A bigger pitch mix, less reliance on the fastball. There was this article, and this was done at the very beginning of spring training, but it was called the Washington Nationals Anti-Fastball Revolution Has Begun. So prior to major league teams using StatCast, which started in 2015, every team in the majors threw over 50% fastballs at the time. Now, 2026, just 7 teams do that. Under Davey Martinez, the Nationals were top 2 in fastball usage for the last 4 years, every single year. Butera, Paul Taboni, and pitching coach Simon Matthews all came from organizations ranked between 10th and 20th in fastball usage last year. So expect a little bit of a different approach here, if not a lot different. And I know, like, again, this article was from pretty early in spring training games, but they said the first 3 spring training games showed it. Like, the fastball percentage was way down, and that was a sign of things to come, most likely. Other things with the pitching, they had the second highest pitches per game last year, 152.8. It's only behind the A's, who obviously are playing in that ballpark. So they have to be more efficient. Second worst team ERA, 5.35. Only the Rockies were worse. Offense wasn't much better. Team WRC plus of 93, 6th worst in the league. And honestly, you got to remember, man, before the season last year, there was quite a few people picking the Nationals as maybe a dark horse wild card team. And not to pat myself on the back, but I was like, I think we're a year or two early here. Like, I get it. James Wood, exciting. CJ Abrams, exciting. At the time, we thought Dylan Cruz exciting. I think maybe we're changing our minds a little bit maybe on that. But the offense was rough. The pitching was rough. Not much positive to speak of. One positive, I guess, if you're looking for things, 8th best stolen base total as a team, so they could run on you. If you're looking on roster resource, every single player on their projected or in their projected starting lineup is in their 20s. The oldest player in the starting lineup, again on roster resource on Fangraphs, is Keibert Ruiz at 27. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if he's their opening day catcher. They have Drew Milas, who's going to get time there. Harry Ford, who we know is going to start in AAA, but that's a big acquisition for them coming over from Seattle. So I think at some point he's probably cutting into that time, 23 years old. The rotation, certainly on paper, underwhelming. I'm glad they brought Zach Littell, right, for some veteran presence. Brought in Miles Michaelis, okay, Foster Griffin, who had success in Japan. Overall, if you're a Nats fan, your eyes should be on the development of Cade Cavalli. Okay, Cavalli's throwing 9 innings in the spring. Not a lot, but he's throwing 9 innings. Holds a 0 ERA. Batters are hitting .036 against him in the spring. So, like, exciting. Like this is the guy right now in the rotation that you want to see develop into, at the very least, a mid-rotation starter, and maybe the ceiling is higher than that. 27% K rate in the spring so far. So lots of really good numbers in a small sample size that you're looking at.
Yeah, as we continue to look at the core, just I'm curious for you when you start looking at some of these names, whether it's Harlan Susanna, Travis Sikora, you mentioned James Wood, Dylan Cruz, Brady House. Are any of these names jumping out at you as outside of James Wood? Because I feel like he's already proven that he's going to be the superstar player that's going to be there for a while. We'd hope so. Any of these other names pop out to you of being similar to this? Because I think a core needs to be 4 or 5 players. Do they have this core in-house right now, or is there someone else in the pipeline that should be added or not even drafted yet? Because we know they're going to be probably drafting high end of the draft this year coming up.
I think this is the year where they're figuring that out for sure. Like the new management, like, do we have pretty good players here, or are any of these guys stars? You just mentioned 2 names I was just going to get to. Like on the farm, you just want Travis Sikora and Harlan Susanna to get healthy, right? Both dealing with injuries. Susanna had surgery to repair a torn right lat. Did start a throwing progression in February. Sikora's out for a long time. Tommy John surgery. Won't see him at any level until 2027. To answer your question, though, a little better, Brady House is the guy that I have my eye on as maybe more than just a pretty good player. He's been fantastic in spring training. Absolutely looks the part. He's batted .438 in spring, 6 doubles, 3 home runs, 11 RBIs, 229 WRC plus. So my eyes are on him early. I think maybe he becomes that other guy. To touch on James Wood, like I'm not 100% sold on the superstar yet. I think he's very good. I think right now you would take him as like an all-star sometimes, maybe not a perennial all-star. I think he can be that, but there are some things he really needs to work on. He was super streaky last year. He started off the season where it's like, holy crap, this guy is better than we thought. 22 home runs from opening day through June. Like he was on a crazy pace. Then just 4 home runs, July and August combined. He hit 188 in July. His K percentage was 27.6% in the first half. It jumped to 39% in the second half. That's not what you want to see. That feels like a player who has not quite figured out how to deal with the super long season. So I need to see if he can avoid that this year with a full season under his belt. Like, can he avoid the second half swoon and those like really long bad streaks? Still just 23 years old. So like you got to put that in perspective. Has not had a good spring so far. He's hitting 156, striking out 27% of the time, which is better than the second half of last season, but still not great. So that's the. I don't know if they have a superstar yet. I think they have some exciting players. We're waiting to see if they can kind of fully realize. But to you, like, do you have someone else in mind that you feel like could be like, if you believe James Wood is going to be the superstar, do you believe there is someone else that is the 1A that you have your eyes on?
I agree with you with the Brady House piece. Everything we're seeing from him, I feel like he could be another building block. To add to that, I'm hoping CJ Abrams can also be the guy. I know that there was the character concerns and the stuff with the curfew and all that. Maybe they're past that. New regime here, type of fresh start, new leaf type of thing with CJ Abrams. But if you can look at these players for the top of the market of who they're supposed to be, James Wood, by all accounts, by all projections this year, he's projecting the middle of the order bat. But as you said before, just as much as being good in the beginning of the year, you have to hold on to it for the end of the year. And maybe you can attribute that to being disinterested because the Nats were well out of it. But that's also a bad thing, too. You have to be able to play through the dog days of August and get through September and keep the numbers where you want them to be, because the struggles, as you mentioned, were pretty profound for a player that started off the season super hot.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys, when he does hit a home run, it's like, oh, my God, like it's super impressive. But can hit the home run to all fields too, like that. The opposite field power is unbelievable. But just speaking of frustrating, Dylan Cruz last year, between injuries, underperformance, super frustrating. He's hitting 107 in the spring. Like, again, this is a guy that you want to get off to a fast start to start believing in again and believing in himself. If he struggles again, man, that word busts, the word you don't want to hear, bust, is going to start to be thrown around. He was taken in 2023 directly behind his LSU teammate Paul Skeens, and before guys like Wyatt Langford, Jacob Wilson, Matt Shaw, Kyle Teal, Bryce Eldridge, taken before those dudes. So like, man, if you're Dylan Cruz, you need to put something together here. Dalen Lyles, another guy we should throw out there. It will be fun to watch him for a whole season at the big league level. He looked great last year. 299, 9 home runs, 8 stolen bases, struck out just 16% of the time. He's a guy who I feel like he can contribute in a lot of different ways. So you should be excited about Dalen Lyle. A little bit of a fantasy sleeper too. We'll throw that in there. You mentioned CJ Abrams. I'll just say it'll be interesting to see like if he is in their long-term plans or if they do look to trade him. There were rumors in the offseason that CJ Abrams could be in a different uniform. I even heard some Yankee rumors about having him in pinstripes instead of Volpe. Like, I don't know. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe Abrams is not in Washington much longer because, they have Brady House there who could maybe play shortstop. You got a guy in the system like Seaver King, who was also a high draft pick. So they might look to go in a different direction there, even though Abrams is, uber talented, can steal, can hit home runs, can do everything. Something to watch. Bullpen, not much to speak of. Closer position is completely up in the air. Traded Finnegan last year, right? I did get a comment from one account. The account is Talk Nats on Twitter. They're pretty simple here. The Nats will win the NL East if the pitchers all turn into aces. And then in parentheses, he said, I know that's not happening, but I do thank him for giving an answer. The over-under here, 64.5. They won 66 last year, so it's a tricky number. I will go over, actually, and only because I have some faith in they're looking at things in a new way. So maybe they do get more out of this club with a completely fresh perspective. They kind of did what I trashed the Twins for not doing, right? We talked about the Twins' hire of Derek Shelton. Like, why couldn't they do something a little more creative? I feel like the Nationals took the approach that, and it doesn't always have to be a bunch of people in their low 30s, but like just people with a fresh perspective when you're in this new phase. So I'll take the over on 64.5. I do think their X factor is Dylan Cruz, like I just kind of alluded to. And that's that. I think unless you have any more thoughts on the Nats, we'll give our predictions for standings, how many playoff teams, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going the over for them as well. The other thing I want to make note of is, and again, for a bad team, you look at the bullpen numbers, all that. One of the things I look at for this emerging core is the defense was horrendous last year. They're 29th by all accounts. So they need to improve that because that's fundamental baseball that you're setting in stone for what is going to be what you build on. At the very least, these guys at a professional level should be able to do those things well. And let's see them be middle of the pack this year defense-wise because there's no excuse for playing the defense they did last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing you feel like you can completely control, right? Or should be able to completely control. So that's not one thing I looked at. And that's an interesting point because even a bad team can be a few games better if you play really solid defense. So as far as playoff teams here, so just to kind of sum up from the other episodes, I only took one out of the West. That was the Dodgers. I took 3 out of the Central. That was the Cubs, the Brewers, and the Pirates, who, kind of my outlier pick here. So I only have 2 spots left. And I think a lot of people think of this division as a 3 postseason team division, but I have 2 coming out of here, and I have my Mets winning the division. There's something I really like about the team this year. I feel good about it. So I have the Mets winning the division. I think they and the Phillies will go back and forth all year. I'll be honest, man. I looked for reasons to take the Phillies out of the playoffs here because, again, I just feel like something is off with the vibes. But their pitching's too good, and their offense's potential, even though I'm not sure I love that they kind of just kept everything the way it was, it's still obviously the ceiling is super high if these guys play to their potential. So we'll go Mets, Phillies. I think those 2 teams will be very, very close. It easily could go the other way. I have the Braves missing. I just think there's too many things going the wrong way for them very, very early, and I worry that there might be some more ahead. And then I have the Marlins and the Nationals. So Mets, Phillies, playoff teams, Braves, Marlins, Nationals, miss it.
So I have the Phillies winning the division, the Mets finishing second, the Braves finishing third, the Nats, and then the Marlins. Actually reverse the Marlins and the Nats. So I have the Marlins finishing above the Nats pulling up the rear. I have the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves making the playoffs to round out my NL playoff picture. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of competitive games in this. And as you mentioned, it could go back and forth with the Mets and the Phillies. It's going to be, at the very least, not sewn up until maybe the second week of the season. I think that's how close it's going to be.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that one. So buckle up, guys. NL East has been full of drama for a few years now, and I don't think we're stopping now.
So stay tuned to our other episode dropping today for the American League East. So this conversation will continue and we'll wrap up our division preview. So you can go back in the archives and check out the Centrals and also the West. And then we're going to put the finishing touches, an exclamation point, if you will, on this preseason conversation with our bracket predictions, our awards, and all that as we get ready for opening day. So get ready, as Devin said, buckle up and get ready for a season that is going to be turbulent for sure. But you guys can follow us at Table Setters Pod on IG and on X for all the updates on baseball. You guys can also check us out on YouTube as well, Table Setters Baseball. Go and check out some of the episodes we dropped this offseason. If you guys were sleeping and maybe hibernating this winter, we have a lot of baseball content that was dropping. So go show it some love. And if you could be so kind, leave a 5-star review. It helps in the algorithm. And tell your friends about it. Join the conversation and let's keep the love of baseball going.
Yeah, and I do think we actually had. I meant to mention this to you. Easy for me to say, but I believe we have a new Spotify review, 5-star review on there. So whoever that was, thank you for that. It does look like we have one additional one on there. So we appreciate it. Like Steve said, it really does go a long way, and at the very least, it makes us feel good for a little while as well.
For sure, we appreciate that. And again, check out the episode later today. The AL East will be back soon, talking all things baseball. Until that time, we'll talk to you after a while. And as always, happy baseball.